What's going on, guys? Welcome back. So Crimson Desert has been getting a pretty steady stream of updates since launch, and Pearl Abyss has now put together an official recap showing just how much has changed the game in a relatively short amount of time. According to the developers, we are looking at 17 patches, more than 20 new features and content additions, 120 new mounts and pets, and 70 new outfits, pieces of equipment, and other items. That is a pretty substantial amount of post-launch support, especially when you start looking at what was actually added instead of just counting fixes. The first major update set the tone by focusing heavily on convenience. New item storage was added, controls were improved, and the game started moving toward a setup where managing your inventory and moving around Pywell felt less restrictive. Then the following update added 5 summonable mounts, including legendary animals and mounts tied to bosses, while also cutting down loading times for fast travel and revival. It also added things like a Make Now option for cooking and crafting, a way to move selected items directly into private storage, extra material chests around the world, and several movement improvements for both characters and horses. The next update went even harder on storage and customization. Private storage could eventually be expanded all the way up to 1,000 slots, depending on Greymane camp progression, and a headgear visibility setting was added so you could decide how helmets and similar items appear during gameplay and cutscenes. There was also a new movement control option, which was useful because players who preferred the earlier sprint behavior could switch back to something closer to that style. Then we got a bigger gameplay-focused patch with new skills for the playable characters, better boss lock on behavior, easier teleportation through Abyss Nexus, and some useful changes for Damian and Unka. Cliff also received a new aerial movement ability, while the 2 other characters gained additional abilities for open-world interaction. On top of that, the map and inventory interfaces were cleaned up, more visual customization options were added, and Intel Arc support and additional graphics options arrived for PC. After that came one of the more important updates for people who wanted more control over the way they played. Easy, normal, and hard difficulty settings were introduced, giving players the ability to adjust the challenge instead of being locked into one experience. Inventory navigation was improved with new category tabs, keyboard and mouse plus controller presets were added, distance scenery quality was improved, and birds were introduced as new pets. That update also included a long list of stability and quality improvements, so it was not just about adding features. Then, things started getting a lot more interesting for endgame players. One of the biggest additions was Boss Rematch, which lets you go back and fight bosses you have already defeated. There are 2 main approaches here. One recreates the original encounter, while the other can scale the boss to your progression when your stats are higher. You can also use different playable characters for these rematches, and the system was initially built around dozens of bosses with plans for further expansion. Alongside that came reblockade content, giving you another reason to return to areas that had already been liberated, plus new legendary animal pets. The next update continued building on that system by adding more bosses to the rematch pool and giving Damian new unarmed combat skills. Soon after, the game received special mounts, a display sheath option, and the claw machine minigame. There was also an extraction feature that lets you recover materials used in refinement, plus additional presentation options such as night tone mode. Then we got a pond for keeping fish and the baby wyvern as a new pet. That same update also improved some shop functionality and equipment management, making the broader collection and crafting side of the game easier to deal with. Controller remapping finally arrived with the next major patch, alongside roughly 30 species of small animals that could be registered as pets. Unka and Damian received additional skills, farming and seed planting were improved, and the game continued expanding the amount of customization available to players. And then came wyverns as actual mounts, which is probably one of those additions that gets people logging back in just to mess around for a while. Cuckoo Bird Chick was added as another pet, and 2 more minigames appeared in Pinball and Orb Roll. Reblockade was also improved, with additional stages added around the flow before and after those encounters. The pet system itself kept expanding after that. New challenges were added so players could register more pets, with the cap increased to 100 registered pets, although only 50 can be summoned at camp at once. Rare equipment that had been lost could also start appearing for purchase through shopkeepers after a period of time, which is a really nice safety net for players who accidentally got rid of something important. Housing then received a major boost. Outdoor areas around houses could be customized, new tools were introduced for crafting, and 58 new housing items were added, including furniture, lighting, facilities, carpets, planters, pet furniture, automata toys, and more. Damian and Unka also gained additional equipment and interaction options, while sliding attacks received chain attacks for each weapon type. The following update brought in new equipment and outfits, and also made it possible to rest with pets. Then, the big platform feature arrived with cross-save, letting players continue the same progression across supported PC and console platforms through one connected save. That means you could keep your Pywell journey going without being locked to one system. After that, the next patch was mostly focused on bug fixes and stability. There were fixes for crops getting stuck, bosses appearing transparent, cross-save loading problems, weird mount animations, wyvern summoning issues, and several other gameplay problems. So even though it did not bring a giant new feature, it helped clean up some of the rougher edges from everything that had been added up to that point. And now the latest highlighted update focuses on trading content improvements. What stands out to me here is the overall direction of the game. The updates have not been centered around one giant expansion that completely changes Crimson Desert overnight. Instead, Pearl Abyss has been steadily building out the systems that surround the main adventure. More ways to travel, more pets, more mounts, more housing, more combat options, more minigames, stronger quality of life, better controls, extra difficulty, boss rematches, repeatable activities, and now improvements to trading. Looking back across all these changes, you can really see Crimson Desert gradually becoming a broader game, rather than simply getting a collection of random additions. The core adventure is still there, but the world has more things to collect, more reasons to revisit old areas, and more ways to spend time between major story moments. And judging from this official recap, that ongoing approach is very much intentional.